Holy moly. That ought to be against the law. We taste right out of the jug. You've got strong vanilla, you've got light cinnamon, you've got a little leather.
Man, that is super, super good.
Look at that. It's that deep mahogany color. It's just deep, rich browns. So it's phenomenal.
For 15 seasons, Moonshiners built its reputation on mystery. Viewers were invited into a world where traditions were fiercely protected and outsiders were kept at a distance. Then, everything changed. A life-changing leukemia diagnosis, an unexpected 6-month production shutdown, and a deeply personal interview forced fans to see the show through a different lens. Together, these moments revealed a story far bigger than anyone imagined. What has really been happening behind the cameras? And why do so many believe Moonshiners have entered a completely new era? Join us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind the show's transformation. The close call that nobody is pretending was just television. For more than a decade, Mark Ramsey and Digger Maines built their reputation on taking risks that most people would never consider. Every season, they seemed to find a way to stay one step ahead, making it look as though luck was always on their side. But there was one encounter that stripped away that confidence almost instantly. It wasn't staged for television, and it wasn't the kind of close call that ends with everyone laughing it off. It forced them to confront a question they had spent years avoiding. What if the next mistake wasn't one they could walk away from? There was one moment in season 14 of Moonshiners that changed everything for Mark Ramsey and Digger Maines. It happened when law enforcement officer David Robertson walked up on the pair and found what appeared to be an illegal moonshine still operating deep in the woods. For a split second, it looked like 14 seasons of outrunning the law had finally come to an end. Robertson wasn't dealing with rumors or second-hand information. He was standing in front of the equipment, looking at two of the most recognizable faces in moonshining. And he knew exactly what the setup was supposed to do. On paper, everything needed for an arrest was right in front of him. But then, one small detail changed the entire outcome. Someone had drilled a hole into the still, making it legally incapable of operating under the definition required to file criminal charges. The intent was obvious. The equipment was there. The men were there. Yet, without that final legal element, there wasn't enough to make an arrest stick. So instead of leaving in handcuffs, Mark and Digger walked away. For viewers, it was one of the most suspenseful moments the series had ever produced.
You know, the 20-gallon remaining here ought to make me happy, and it does to a certain extent, but it still reminds me we got 30-gallon that ain't here.
That's right. That's $12,000, basically.
Yeah.
For Mark and Digger, it was something much more serious. Months later, Digger admitted that the encounter had genuinely shaken them. Not because it created good television, but because it forced them to confront a possibility they had spent years pushing to the back of their minds. For the first time, the risk of everything coming crashing down didn't feel distant or hypothetical. It felt real. Instead of heading back into the woods for another run, they made a decision that surprised even longtime fans. They stopped. For 6 months, there were no moonshine runs. They voluntarily shut everything down and stepped away to think about what came next. It was a personal decision made by two men who had suddenly realized just how close they had come to losing everything. When Digger later reflected on that period in a January 2026 interview, he revealed something that was more honest than anything viewers had heard in 15 seasons. He admitted that the fear of prison had never been far from their minds. But that wasn't all he revealed, because Digger was also facing a far more personal battle. So what was the thing that landed underneath the arrest? The thing that had already changed the weight of every risk before Robertson ever showed up with a warrant? The night the season 13 premiere changed everything. When Moonshiners season 13 premiered on January 2nd, 2024, the audience tuned in expecting the usual opening energy. A new season, new challenges, and two Tennessee Shiners figuring out creative solutions to familiar problems. What they got instead was a scene that stopped the room cold. Digger sat down across from Mark and told him he had been diagnosed with leukemia. The production company filmed it, cut it into the premiere, and aired it without telling either man how the editing had landed. Digger watched the episode go out at the same moment as the rest of the audience, something he has always found disorienting, and that night found genuinely jolting. The edit made it feel more terminal than it was. Phrases spoken in one emotional context were assembled into a sequence that read like a farewell. The Moonshiners fan base immediately started grieving across every social media platform. By the time the credits rolled, the internet had already decided it was watching a goodbye. Digger got on Facebook that same night and did what he has always done: told the truth without ornament. The production company had filmed him breaking the news to Mark before the full diagnostic picture was clear. More extensive testing had since produced a definitive result: chronic lymphocytic leukemia. CLL, a cancer of the blood and bone marrow, is the most common form of leukemia in adults, progressive over time, not terminal in the way the editing implied, but not fun either. His exact phrasing was that CLL would probably make him miserable until something else killed him. The dark humor of someone who has genuinely reckoned with something and comes out still standing on the other side of it. He asked for prayers, clarified it wasn't goodbye, and went back to his life. When the season 14 near arrest landed on top of that diagnosis, the combination produced the 6-month shutdown and eventually the most honest stretch of public statements either man has ever made about what they are actually doing and what it actually costs them. So, what had been building up across all those seasons, and was the show ever quite what it said it was? The gap that finally got too wide to cross. When the show premiered in December 2011 and immediately drew nearly 3 million viewers, the Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Bureau issued a public statement within days. If illegal activity had actually been occurring during filming, they said, they would have taken action. Since they hadn't, the implication required no translation.
Uh-oh. We got problems right here, Jim. I got blue lights. Oh my God. Gotta try to handle this situation. Let me get over here.
All right.
I guess I've had better days.
What's going on?
She just cut off on me. I guess she got a little hot.
The illegal moonshining being depicted was not, by the state's own account, actually illegal moonshining. The production company maintained the content was authentic. The cast maintained it was real. Virginia ABC went further and clarified that they had agreed to participate in what they understood was a documentary about moonshine history, not a show depicting active illegal production. Had they known how it would be framed, they said publicly, they would never have participated. They formally requested that Discovery Channel add a disclaimer at the beginning of each episode identifying the content as dramatized. That request was, by public record, never actioned. So, from the very first season, the show existed in a constructed middle space. Real moonshiners with real knowledge and real 200-year cultural roots, presented through a production framework that needed enough law enforcement tension and enough close calls to fill a Tuesday night schedule for 15 years running. That framework has its own needs entirely separate from what is or isn't happening in any specific set of woods. For Digger, this tension has never been abstract. He finds it genuinely offensive, in his bones, not performatively, that what the men of his community did for centuries to feed their families is still criminal under federal law. He came into this show wanting to put the real tradition on camera before it disappeared. What he found was a machine that needed the tradition shaped into something cable audiences could follow in 60-minute increments, which meant compressing it, amplifying the danger, and building episodic structures around chase sequences and close calls that may or may not have been precisely what they appeared. He stayed because the alternative was no record at all. The old men who held this knowledge were aging out. The tradition was going with them. So Digger stayed, and he and Mark navigated the gap between the show's claimed reality and its actual construction for 15 seasons, until season 14 produced something real enough to make that navigation feel, for the first time, genuinely untenable. And the way Digger described the reset for season 15 was the most revealing thing he has said about that gap in public. In the outlaw world, he told TV Insider, when a problem comes up, you figure it out yourself, or you don't figure it out at all. In the legal world, you can just make a call. That observation sounds practical. Sitting inside the accumulated context of a leukemia diagnosis and a near arrest and a 6-month shutdown, it sounds like a man quietly describing the specific exhaustion of operating in a space with no recourse for 15 years. What are the 3 things Digger was actually revealing? And what does each one tell you about where this is all heading? 3 revelations and 1 direction. The first is about his body. CLL is progressive. The National Cancer Institute is clear on that. The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's data shows that 70% of CLL patients live more than 10 years post-diagnosis with proper management, which is genuinely encouraging. But proper management of a progressive blood cancer and running illegal distillation operations in the hills of East Tennessee at night are not infinitely compatible activities at the same intensity level across the next decade. Digger's public response to the diagnosis has been to accelerate rather than retreat, which is an extraordinary human response. It is also a response with a natural endpoint, and everybody, including Digger, knows it. The second is about exposure. The season 14 near arrest didn't just produce 6 months of silence. It produced something more durable, a clear demonstration that the legal jeopardy is real, in a way that 15 seasons of television had successfully kept in the abstract. A federal moonshining conviction would not just end the show. It would torch every other legitimate commercial relationship that Mark and Digger have spent a decade constructing on top of their television identity. Everything downstream of that identity evaporates if the identity becomes a convicted federal criminal rather than a beloved outlaw television star. That calculation existed before season 14. After season 14, it became impossible to set aside. The third is about authenticity, the one Digger circles most carefully without ever landing on it in a single direct statement. 15 seasons of producing a show about illegal moonshining while the state of Virginia publicly confirms no illegal moonshining is occurring, creating a professional exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. It is the exhaustion of maintaining a constructed identity season after season, when the reason you entered this in the first place was to put something genuine on the record. Digger went on Facebook the night of the leukemia premiere to set the record straight, because the gap between what the show presented and what was real had become personally intolerable in that moment. That instinct to correct the record and to insist on the truth of his own experience against what the edit implied is the instinct of someone who has always cared more about authenticity than mythology. Those 3 things together are what Digger has been revealing across every public statement since January 2024, and they all point toward the same place. Before we get there, though, there is one more element that makes this story genuinely complex, rather than simply sad. Because while the show has been navigating its own sustainability, Digger and Mark have been building something that needs none of this. And that thing is thriving in ways that have nothing to do with the woods. The empire that doesn't require anyone to hide. Sugarland's Distilling Company opened in Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 2014 and celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2024 with new product launches and a sold-out birthday event at the distillery. Their personal collaboration line has been building for a decade. Rye Apple Moonshine in 2015, Hazelnut Rum in 2017, Mountain Legacy Corn Whiskey in January 2024 that sold out its launch weekend. Roaming Man Tennessee Straight Rye Whiskey won 4 double gold medals at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, including 2 in 2025. These are not vanity awards handed to celebrity brands for showing up. These are medals from one of the most respected spirits competitions on Earth, given to a product built from the same knowledge base Digger has been applying in the woods for 40 years. The difference is, nobody is watching for patrol lights at Sugarlands. In March 2026, Progressive American Flat Track announced Sugarlands as its official moonshine and whiskey partner for the 2026 season, with Mark and Digger serving as grand marshals at the Atlanta Short Track at Senoia Raceway and the Peoria TT in August. These are major events at which 2 men from Newport, Tennessee, are being presented as the official face of an American spirits brand, not because of what they make in the woods, but because of what they have built legally in Gatlinburg over 10 years. The significance for the Moonshiners story is precise. In 2012, the show was the thing. Everything downstream of Mark and Digger's public identity, their reach, their recognition, their ability to open any door in the spirits industry came from Discovery Channel. In 2026, that relationship has inverted entirely, which means that when Digger describes going back to their roots for season 15, he is describing both a creative reset for television and what remains available when the television ends. So what does the relationship between these 2 men look like underneath all of this? And why is the partnership itself the real subject of everything Digger has been saying? The partnership that is the real story. None of what Digger has revealed lands with its full weight without Mark Ramsey standing next to it. The show has always been 2 people, not 1. And everything that has accumulated since January 2024, the leukemia, the arrest, the prison fear, the 6-month shutdown, landed on both of them simultaneously, not sequentially. When the season 13 premiere showed Mark's face absorbing the leukemia news in real time while the cameras rolled, you were watching a man learning that the partnership he had built his professional identity around had just been given a shape it didn't have before. The assumption that these 2 would keep doing this for as long as they wanted, indefinitely, on their own terms, in their own hills, had been interrupted by something that didn't care about production schedules or network renewals. Everything that followed, including the way Mark described season 15's challenges to TV Insider as coming from a whole other angle than anything they were used to managing, is Mark processing the implications of that shape alongside Digger. Mark's wife, Sally Jane Clark, has her own product at Sugarlands, Sally Jane's Apple Pie Shine, which tells you something about how deeply the legal side of the business has woven itself into both their families. Digger's wife runs Fruit Jar Alley, a clothing boutique in Newport. These families have been building their lives in the same community for decades. The show is one visible layer of a friendship and professional partnership that exists in multiple other layers simultaneously. The distillery, the town, the 40 years of shared craft knowledge that neither man needs a television contract to access or validate. So, the question is, what does 2026 hold for them? Where everything lands in 2026 Season 15 is on the air. Discovery has not announced a cancellation, and core cast members including Tim Smith, Tickle, and Mark and Digger are reportedly slated to return for Season 16 in late 2026. The show is pulling its audience on Tuesday nights and generating press that 15 seasons of audience loyalty and genuine craft knowledge produce without much effort. Digger is managing his CLL and doing what he has always done, showing up for the craft and the culture and the community that made him in every format available to him at whatever pace the next chapter of his life requires. But the Moonshiners that existed in the imagination of its long-term audience, the version where two Tennessee outlaws ran genuine illegal shine in genuine defiance of federal law, where the stakes were real, the risk was the point, and the outlaw mythology held from one season to the next without anyone named it for what it might have been, that show's ending is what Digger has been narrating since January 2024. In an interview where prison fear was named out loud for the first time in 15 seasons. In a 6-month shutdown that nobody scheduled and everybody understood. In the phrase going back to their roots, which carries different weight when you have CLL and a recent near arrest than it does in a promotional statement from a network press release. That is the real reason. Not a ratings collapse or a scandal anybody can point to cleanly. Time, health, exposure, and the slow, honest reckoning of two men in the hills of East Tennessee deciding what version of what they love is still possible, given everything that has changed around them and inside them. Which, when you think about it, is the most Appalachian ending this show could possibly have. Not loud or dramatic, just two people figuring out what survives and what doesn't. The way people in those hills have always figured that out. Quietly, in the dark, on their own terms. If you were in Digger's position, would you keep risking everything to preserve a tradition, or walk away while you still could? And do you think Moonshiners can ever feel the same again after everything that's happened? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.